Okay. So because you've all agreed, I've just started recording the meeting. So I guess we'll do sort of formalities at the beginning of these meetings, just so that somebody viewing later can have a nice introduction. What do you think, Kevin?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Yep. So I guess we should say welcome everybody to this pre-power and pre-services meeting. I'm Tom, and joining me regularly is going to be at least Kevin. So if you could say hello, Kevin.
Hi.
And the purpose of these meetings is to have group conversations about these concepts as they're being developed, give a broader audience an opportunity to participate in contributing to getting these concepts up and running, and to capture the knowledge as it's evolving and unfolding. And I think today, well, this is the first meeting, and I think the purpose of today is or the main focus of today's discussion is around governance and legals, and what it's going to take to get the preliminary part of this ecosystem of prepaid services up and running. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin? Have I got that right?
Yep. Yes, the essential idea is that we're going to include customers inside the governance somehow or other. When you have two parties trading together, if you like, one party produces something and another party consumes it. The way in which things happen at the moment is that the party producing it is really the one in control of everything. They set the prices, and they determine effectively the profits, etc. And they don't really involve the consumer at all, the customer. And this leads to issues when markets are meant to operate so that if you've got many customers, and the many customers can come along and choose the suppliers that have the lowest prices and the best deals and so forth. But that's very complicated, very hard to do, and it doesn't work very well because the customers really have no knowledge of the details of what's going on inside the producers very often. And very often the producers are in a monopoly or oligopoly sort of situation. So it becomes really difficult to do that. So somehow or other we want to be able to include customers in the governance, but also we want to be able to include the people who actually do the work. They're very often the staff associated with the things. At the moment now, the producers are almost always only represented by the people who supply the money to the organisations. They're the owners, and they're the ones who really control everything. So we want to be able to include these other voices.
Yeah, but by way of background, Kevin, that's kind of exactly what these models are trying to achieve, right? That's what you've just described there, is the fundamental theory that sits behind the very essence of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you chose just to start with that. It's not funny, it's natural, of course, because that's where we both are, because we've been having these conversations. But I was thinking about this meeting and just doing a bit of last minute prep work, and I thought I had prepared some diagrams that were not related to this meeting, and I quickly reviewed them, and I thought they were actually really appropriate to this meeting. And the first couple of images actually just visually represent what you were talking about.
So can you show us those?
I'll bring them up. But before that, it's also worth pointing out that where we are is, at the moment, from Pingala's perspective, is Pingala a couple of weeks ago held a board meeting of its cooperative, and at that board meeting, these concepts were introduced, and it was agreed that a committee would be formed to explore the concepts further, specifically in relation to governance and entering into some sort of an agreement. And then likewise, Kevin's company, WLPC, had a meeting last week where we presented these concepts. And again, likewise, there are next steps with a strong focus on the governance and starting to enter into agreements. So that's just worth mentioning. That's where we are in our journey. So I'll just share my screen and just show these couple of diagrams. So this is one that we used at the WLPC meeting, and so Kevin was just saying that the way the current system works, or the company customer system works, is that the company owns the means of production. The COG is my attempt to describe the means of production, whatever the productive asset is that you've spent your capital money on. But the customer can't see that. Only the owner of that can see it. And so the customer over here, all they can see is what product, what productive output, what product is being offered in the marketplace. And so it's really, the onus sits on the customer to satisfy themselves that what they're being offered is the right product at the right price. And the way that works is we have very many suppliers and very many customers in what's known as a marketplace with competition. And as Kevin just mentioned, oftentimes those marketplaces don't work. We have market failure, and there's a number of areas where it kind of feels like we've got market failure going on, and the area that Pingala works is in the energy space, and certainly that is an area where it feels like we're not getting the products we actually want at the price that we need them. There's a different way of operating, and that would be for the customer and the supplier to work collaboratively or collectively, and co-own and collectively operate the means of production and share the benefits, have transparency, and share the output. And I've been toying in my head with the interplay of this concept of collectively or co-owning and co-operating, and it naturally leads us to think about what are the root sources of the name a cooperative. And really, Pingala is taking a cooperative approach to reimagining what our energy systems are about. So I just thought I'd share those diagrams with you. And yeah, I've got a couple more, but maybe that's a good starter. What do people think?
Yeah, and I mean, it's really good because this one, we've got a great opportunity at the moment now in Australia to do the combination, because we can all become producers of electricity. The customers can become producers of electricity by putting panels and things on your rooftop, so that you do become a producer as well as a consumer. Yes. So that's why we've got such a great opportunity with this with Pingala to do this.
Yeah. Maybe I will just jump to the next diagrams, because I think they really form a good intro to what we're talking about. So when Kevin and I and others have been out there talking to people about these concepts, I started drawing this diagram on paper, and it became really useful in describing what it is that we're doing, and it's then become a thing that we've used to be a bit of a foundation for some of the conversations we've had. So I think conceptually this is a really helpful way of thinking about what it is that we're doing here. So what we're doing from Pingala's perspective is we would love to be able to support communities around Australia to start up, take control of their own energy, be in control, have local ownership and share the benefits of that ownership. And we were already along that path of doing that. But when the opportunity came to start working with Kevin and his current company, WLPC, it became apparent that they were providing the sort of technology platform that would make that a lot easier for us. So WLPC are creating a technology platform that allows someone like Pingala to support an ecosystem of local energy co-ops. But simultaneously, we're also expecting there will be pre-homes. Well, this is my terminology. It's not the terminology that will stick, because obviously people will give things their own name, but homes using the same concepts, and healthcare funding and water funding, maybe tax funding, all done using this concept. And what we've done here is deliberately put the local people at the top, because we're turning the hierarchy upside down. There's, it's not like this is a central command and control model. It's actually an interconnected network. And then if we start thinking about the way the governance for this is probably going to work, we start thinking it actually really needs the customers are most important. Without customers, you don't have any sort of commercial success in these sort of networked business models. But also the suppliers are really important in the model. And as Kevin just suggested there, we might also need to start thinking about the other people who are contributing. And that one's interesting to me, because it's workers and investors are the people with capital. It's that very old debate about who owns the means of production.
Right.
And we didn't even start with that. We actually started with customers and suppliers.
Right. Instead of calling it this concept, Tom, I just want to offer that maybe you could just refer to the model as a decentralized business model with people as the intermediary.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, because it qualifies it. And then also it's not a platform that Kevin's designed, really. It's more of a network. And I think that allows for more fluidity in how you perhaps might get into describing how everything's connected, even the people, and they become a grid. So,
yeah, I think that's right. Some of you will have seen that I've sent around a link, and this wouldn't include you, Trina, but leading sort of new thinking economist Kate Rayworth, who's written the book Donut Economics, has been doing the circuits recently, and she recently spoke at the actual TED event, and in her talk she specifically addresses this concept of distributive design around the business models.
Right.
So I recommend everybody to jump into that talk, and it's approximately at the 12-minute mark, where she specifically addresses this. And when you hear her talking, you think that's exactly what we're doing. And it's so inspiring to have validation from someone who's such a leading thinker in this space.
Right. It's pretty much at the core of any blockchain-based business to be using the distributed technology. It's a decentralized business model because it's actually taking away the intermediary, and then it's putting people in a place of empowerment. That could be happening in any number of areas, from price reduction, reducing inflation, everything that you're up to and within your business model. So I think you're right on point with a number of initiatives. Unfortunately, I think in a lot of these decentralized models, there's a lot of discussion about the technology, and really it's a case of comparing how your business and what you're doing breaks the back of the way the existing business is run, because that's where the entire case will unfold, right? It's just an enabler that reduces cost of normal connection points between all the different flows that have to happen to make something like this come together.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think we could. I've spoken too much. Kevin, you go.
Oh, I was just going to mention that we don't quite know how it's all going to end up. As we start to do, and I think the pre-power one is relatively clear as to what we need to do. And so that's because people will be producers as well as customers, and so that makes it a little bit easier. So that's a good one to start with. And the intention with the WLPC one is to try and mimic what happens with the other one. So so tomorrow we're having a chat with the people, with some of the other shareholders, and we will try and use the same ideas and see if we can come up with something as to how it could work for a company.
Yeah, and so yeah, just to give again a bit more sort of insight into where we're up to. Those meetings, as I described, had happened. So shareholders meeting of WLPC, board meeting of Pingala, and subcommittees have been formed. But I think there's really two main tasks that fall out of this that are actually what we want to talk about today, and they are, although we may have this rough conceptual idea of what we want the governance model to look like in terms of who the key stakeholders are, and there's more to that than just this, which I'll come to in a second. We also, that's a destination. It's not necessarily the journey to get there. And so the journey to get there starts with two things. One is WLPC is currently a company, and it needs to do certain things in its constitution and its governance arrangements to take it the first step towards what this will be in its destination. Pingala is currently a co-op where it has a bunch of shareholders, and possibly, and I'm arguing this, well, not arguing, but I'm prosecuting the case, I suppose, with the people at Pingala, that actually the existing Pingala co-op is probably better described as one of these. And so what we need to do is to create a new entity as quickly as possible. And the way to do that quickly is to not form a new co-op. It's probably to form a company. So there's two companies, one that's already formed, one that's about to be formed. Both of them need to have a proto mutually owned constitution developed. That's the first task.
Yes, so we need to get some people to work on that. So what's your, do you have any ideas as to who we can get to work on that, Tom?
Not any solid ideas. There are no. I don't. I think the plan is not to get money in to pay people, but let's just get to the second task. The second task is really, it's this link between the two organisations. Mm-hmm. Is going to be comprised of many things, but the main thing that will support it will be what we might right now call a pre-services agreement or pre-purchasing agreement. So we have the two entities incorporated, and then we can allow them to enter into a pre-purchase agreement with each other. That allows us to have what you could call investment coming in to pay people to do the future work. So we need to bootstrap this stuff without any money in the system. And that's a long-winded answer to your question. I think the answer is people can't get paid for that work up front.
Yeah. So you're saying that we need to get the pre-services agreement done.
Yeah.
That worked out.
Yeah, and the two entities need to be ready, there, and one of them currently doesn't exist. The two entities need to be there to enter into those agreements with each other.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I can go ahead and work out what an agreement we would like to have with you. In other words, we will be supplying you with a product. And we will be suggesting as to how we get paid for it, etc. So maybe we'll do that as one of the first things.
Yeah, there is one thing worth mentioning, and that is there's this organisation and a person behind that organisation that I've been out of touch with for some time, and his name is Andrew Ward, and he's created a new concept called Incubator.coop, and it's really taking the ideas. It's really creating an incubator for co-ops, but not like a venture capitalist incubator. It's like a co-op incubator using the cooperative principles. And so I reached out to Andrew the other day, and it turns out that he's been grappling with a bunch of these same problems around how do we bootstrap these organisations into existence. There's no big money pot in the future that there's going to be this huge profit coming in. So how do we give people confidence that they might put work in now and they could get paid for it later? I've just got to notice my internet connection stable, so just wave at me if it start becoming too patchy. And so what he's been developing is what he calls a concept of treaties, which sounds very similar to a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, Kevin, that where we were using different terminology. It was kind of like promises. And I think he might have a more solid legal framework to underpin his. I mean, they're not actually legally binding agreements, but there is a documentation. There is documents. And
can we get hold of that then?
Yeah. So the task for me is to join Incubator, and it's individuals who join. So I'd suggest that you'd also join Incubator.coop, and we can have the conversation with them about.
Okay, shall do.
The shared challenge that we're working on.
So you'll send me the information on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But really interesting stuff. I mean, and it's really member-based social network stuff. So you join this collaborative co-op, which is about supporting each other to start up. You might be a service provider, you might be a co-op that's wanting to start up, and they get matched together, and they enter into these treaties or promises with each other. And if you break the treaty, then there needs to be a negotiation. And if worse comes to worse, the ultimate consequence is you get kicked out of the co-op. So there's consequences. It's just not the traditional sort of legal agreement, financial and other recourse consequences we're more familiar with.
Is he going to have a shared system element to that? Shared system that co-op needs to use? I think that would be a really wise track to consider, because then that's probably the highest utility if you're all under a similar mandate, other than what language you're putting to governance and treaties and other such areas, being able to access something that's that are systems. And obviously I think that Pingala is in a bit of a mothership position there with what you've put together so far, and the brand and everything that you have as a substance of what you're putting underneath it all, to be in that kind of a position to then work with a group like that to say, we could similarly be a shared system provider to other cooperatives, and in that there could be sort of passive income in some respects, right? It's all shared costs distributed.
Yeah, that's right. I think so. And I'll be honest, I do grapple with this internally within myself, because we're all about empowering local communities to be in control, to derive the benefits, to make the choices, yet we're sort of creating a mothership platform type thing. And wisely said, maybe we shouldn't be calling it that. And it's more of a network. But
I mean, sometimes it can be just a shared resource that even a CRM company could donate, right? You don't know yet how that could run. I mentioned to Kevin in the past that I had access to the entire utility system that was built for Scotland on Sweet CRM, which was the replacement for Sugar. I was like, well, that would be a hell of a coup for Pingala to have access to an actual utility CRM in use by an institutional player. All the code's written, everything's there. So, you know, sometimes it's just opening up creative discussions about where to access the different business systems as well that
And
will
who's
layer on
using
top.
that over in Scotland?
Pardon me?
Who did you say is using that in Scotland?
The whatever the main utility company is in Scotland. I'm not sure if there's more than one, but it was a large ERP project put in, and the entire thing was based on open source. So, you know, even just it's my intention in time to, as we discuss things, to open up dialogues around things like that I think could be of use. But you know, the interesting thing is that if the nature of co-ops, and perhaps you're an influencer, is to make a new collective model, I've been calling it a humocracy, obviously because that's a riff on human. With our direction, we want to be an enabler and provider of these systems in a way that then just layers into revenue share and then you know, isn't interfering or putting a heavy cost burden on the enablement of businesses like yours, right? Because it's all got to get as much zero based as possible. So if there's other cooperatives too that needed to use them, then that incubator might be a really interesting place to put it, or create a linkage.
Yeah, I'll connect with you afterwards, Trina, about that. I'll enthusiastically chase up any opportunity to create links with Scotland. My wife and I are moving to Glasgow in January.
Oh wow, it's amazing there.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'll be doing tomorrow, which is probably the main one that'll be of most interest to my shareholders, is working out what's going to happen to their shares. And the shares, if they agree, will be turned into pre-services. And that's to a certain extent to get rid of the problem associated with the governance, because the governance now becomes that all shareholders or all pre-service holders effectively are equal, rather than anyone who happens to be me at the moment being in control. So the structure of those pre-service agreements is going to be pretty critical as to how they work. So we'll be talking about that. And also the other thing that I'll be talking to them tomorrow about is the mechanics of the accounting, how the accounting is going to work. So that we can show that we're still, so that the people who end up being directors of the company can with their hands on their hearts say that that the company is still viable and is not in danger of being insolvent. So, so that's a really important part of the whole thing.
Kevin, that first point you've raised, I think, is a really, really relevant and important point to raise in this discussion right now. And effectively, what we can see is there's a pathway. We currently have a governance arrangement in your company, which is a very traditional corporate arrangement: one share, one vote. And there might be, one particular shareholder who has, a majority control over the organisation. We can see what the destination looks like. It looks very much like something like the customers, the suppliers, the workers, the investors, and actually probably also just a public interest community representative are all in control, because there's effectively going to be a commons. Now, you're not proposing to your shareholders that they go straight from here to the destination. What you'll be proposing is that they go to some sort of interim arrangement. We can't create the full governance structure right now for practical reasons, and also just because without an ecosystem, how can you have all of those non-existent customers in control? There's no customer.
Yeah.
They can't be in control. So there almost needs to be a sort of a transition custodian role.
Mm-hmm.
And
effectively, that's what will happen, and people will just initially just have to trust me in terms of our company. But I think they will. So
but my understanding and I'll choose my words carefully here, but my understanding is likely that the transition from the current arrangement, which is equity shareholders with one member, one share, one vote, is likely to be, and where some people have less votes than other people, is likely to be replaced with a one member, one vote arrangement. No equity, instead of the equity has been converted into pre-purchase services, what you just call PRIS.
Correct.
So actually, for the majority of those members, shareholders, they're not losing. I mean, they're not losing anything in terms of the deemed value of their investment, but they are gaining a lot of control.
Correct.
Those that are in minority positions. But that also needs to be given on the understanding that as the ecosystem is built, they'll be ceding that control. And I think that's a tricky conversation to have.
Yes, that's right. That will be the, I anticipate that will be the problem with one or two, or may not be a problem because the alternative isn't too good. So, so we'll see what happens there, and I'll report back on what goes on there.
And I think at Pingala's level, my proposal, and there has been no discussion about it yet, but my proposal is that we create a new company, and that company remains wholly controlled and in the ownership of the existing Pingala Co-op, who play the role of custodians. But because there's no shareholders. Well, there are shareholders, but Anyway, the shareholders are cooperative shareholders, and they have one member, one vote. So there'll need to be a similar understanding that you're in control today, but you're in a custodian transitional arrangement, and you will be ceding control into the future, and that probably looks like you'll be ceding control as you become a customer, member, owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone?
For me, I'm just sort of visualizing this as sort of interconnected loops. They're a whole bunch of circles that are all tied to each other, up,
Yes.
down, horizontally. And maybe it's just the classic network diagram of nodes and links between the nodes is a better way of thinking about it.
What we're attempting to do here is to get a network as opposed to a hierarchy. And a network being a distributed type approach to things. So. Yeah,
and just to be clear, the reason we're doing this is not because we're, political socialists who think that, you shouldn't have any hierarchy or something. It's, some of us might think that, but it's actually as much an economic thing as it is a democratic thing.
Yes, the belief is that this will be cheaper to do. It'll be less costly, and certainly if we can get this pre-services agreement and the way in which that all works, and also the way in which people can invest with prepayments of things working, it is so much simpler than shareholdings and all that stuff that you have to go through that it's just extraordinarily. It just costs so much to set up companies and to operate them and to try, and then it's really, really difficult for people to actually get their equity out of them unless you list them or do something or other. It's really, really hard for people to get money in and out of these things. So yeah.
Go on, Trina, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask if, and forgive my ignorance of your marketplace there, but are there actually dedicated funds to solar that people invest in there?
For solar,
the funds that are investing in solar projects, are there?
For some superannuation funds, they say they put their stuff into there. I think there are some funds that do investments in solar, or in renewables. Generally, I think they're more just renewables as opposed to
Right.
Tim, you might know. Feel free to jump in. But not answering the question. The problem in Australia, and it's probably a global problem, is there's too many investors, too many funds, and not enough projects to invest in.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh, is that true? Is it? Okay.
Well, I believe that to be the case from everything. I've never heard otherwise. Yeah. And we're often being contacted by organisations who are like, oh, you're doing projects, we're looking to invest. So we got contacted by a big UK pension fund about a year ago.
Right.
We're looking for projects to invest in Australia.
Oh, that is interesting.
And their model is have you pulled the thread on that with any of them?
No. And the reason why Pingal is we're not saying no to those organisations. We're just saying the whole reason we were set up is, and the first project we did was to give local people an opportunity to invest in clean energy in their local community, which is perhaps missing. It's not to create more avenues for institutional investors who've got plenty of opportunities to invest in clean energy.
Right.
Yeah.
So they couldn't be investors in pre-power?
They could, absolutely, but that was a year ago, and I only met Kevin 6 months ago.
Right. No, I'm just it's you never know though. I think in terms of money, it's really important to always just say yes and get them to what it is that they want, and then you've established a relationship, even if you say no, we're not ready. You know, just if that happens again, even if you think it's the wrong money. I mean, I'm not suggesting you waste your time, but if it's a fund, it has applicability to your sector. So having the relationships with as many as possible, I think will be a great idea.
And I think we have reason to believe that pension funds are going to be quite interested in this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers' funds, if they have them there. Yeah.
And Australia has a lot of that. We have this thing called the superannuation scheme.
Right, I hear it's quite fat, so that's good.
It's quite fat. On the back of Kevin's comments, there were three things that really came to mind, and they're three things from Kevin. So, but I think they're really relevant. I've let Kevin talk about this. That we've essentially got these information systems that are being run really inefficiently, and the first one is our IT information systems by their very architecture with these centralized databases. Are actually run very inefficiently, and there's new techniques emerging, and many people herald blockchain as being a way of making things more efficient, and they use the phrase low friction to describe that. But I think what we're doing here is actually much more efficient because it's much more of a genuine peer-to-peer, not a supported peer-to-peer network. The second information system is the money system, which by the way that it's evolved, and you can totally understand why it's not a criticism of what happened, it's just that we've landed where we are now and we're thinking we can do better. But by the way it's evolved, we've given money a value over time, and that's introduced a huge amount of costs in the system. Right. It's a very expensive to run information system. We're solving those two problems. And the third point was probably quite good, but I can't remember what it was.
It's okay to get lost. You'll be found again. It's fine.
It was something related to those two.
It all sounded very clever, so no worries there.
Yeah, but it was definitely those things that Kevin was talking about had made me think about information systems and efficiency.
Yeah, the problem with the money system is that, or the way in which people think of economics is that they think it exists outside the minds of humans. But it's an invention that we've made, and then trying to think that you can make a mechanical thing, it just doesn't work. Because traditional economics, if you like, and the way in which they think about it and the way in which it's operated, assumes that it's a natural thing, and it's like physics. It's like stuff interacting. but it's not like that at all. It's, value, which is what money is, that our interpretation of value is all in the mind. And we should be recognising that and building our systems around those things, as opposed to thinking it's just a mechanical box.
We were talking earlier about some regulatory things. Do we want to talk about those? The
regulatory ones. There are two. Well, there's a whole lot of regulations on all sorts of different things, but these prepayments, if you like, are very common, and they are just treated as though they're just part of the normal payment system. So that's what we hope that we'll be able to present to the appropriate regulators, that's the way it should be regulated, because it's not a separate system. It's just part of the payment system, and as such, the rules and regulations around that can be quite easily held. The issue becomes when I was talking to the ASIC people, they said that providing we don't make these things that we have, these credits, tradable, then there shouldn't be, when I say tradable, there's a market for them, where anyone can come and offer a price for them, then it shouldn't be a problem. Now, so I think we can structure our things so that we actually don't have markets in the traditional sense for these things. There is a price for these things, and it's fixed. So you can trade them in the sense that you can exchange them, but there's no market there, because the value is known, and so it doesn't come under the jurisdiction of financial markets.
Well,
anyway,
I feel we can make these predictions and hypotheses about what the regulators might say until the cows come home. Nothing's gonna stack up against what they actually decide. And the approach that we're taking is tending towards an approach of building it and then asking them how it should be regulated. That doesn't mean that's exactly what we do. We satisfy ourselves to a fair degree of confidence that we're okay. But we don't try to get to 100% confidence, because you can't. And then we build it, and then we go take it to the regulators and say, this is what we've done.
In fact, that's what they told me to do, right?
That's what they told you to do. Great.
Yeah, they said effectively, you get the system going, and then come and ask us, and we will tell you. So that's effectively, and the crucial one is the tax office, because if the tax office likes it and are not unhappy with it, then I think they will convince the others, if there's any problems, that it's a good thing to do. By the way,
as you were chatting there, Kevin, I remember what my third point was. So the first point was we're building a more efficient information IT system. We're building a more efficient economic system. And then on top of that, we're actually getting rid of a whole bunch of systems that would normally exist inside an enterprise, because we only have to manage a payment system. We don't have to manage equity, debt, credit, all of those things. We're not going to have to manage those. So actually, it's going to be even more efficient. It's 3 levels of efficiency at least that we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's all cost.
Forgive me, but I think that's a bit of an overstatement. I mean, you have to have typical business systems. Just because something's decentralized, it still means you have the core system that you're making more efficient. And you have to have customer acquisition and everything that's involved with presenting and bringing.
We need to have customer acquisition. That's without a doubt.
Right.
We'll need to have accounting systems as well. But we're not going to need to keep track of equity and shareholders. So we won't have a shareholder registry that we insource.
Right, but the cost of that is, I mean, there's a literal cost to your business, but the actual systems cost of that. I mean, I'm perhaps
You
I'm
might be
naive.
right, Trina. I could well be overstating it because I like to do it.
No.
Well, I guess what I get concerned about, Tom, is that it feels like it pulls down the story from the actual business model being compared to what it is to the way you traditionally buy and use electricity, and how that you're breaking that. I think if you go from top down and are, I mean, we're always practicing pitching whoever it is that we're going to be with, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just, in generalities, yes, it's all true, but I think it's just. And keep in mind, my background's marketing, and I've only worked in emerging tech and things that have never been done before. So I'm always just mining for language and terminology to help simplify as much as possible.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm sorry if I sound preachy. I'm actually thinking out loud and saying, that sounded very intelligent, but at the same time, it to the layman, it suggests things, and it's not necessarily pounding home what your key message will be, is that it's decentralized because it counters on the way that electricity and all the costs that are layered underneath it are delivered. And Kevin does a masterful job of describing all the inflation and everything that goes into how infrastructure is bought, paid for, and then delivered to us. And we're always at what the market can bear price point. And those are the things that are very relatable to people. I mean, they know what it is to pay their bill, right? Even if you're talking to a sophisticated investor, right?
Can I just interrupt here? We're not changing any systems, Trina. What we're doing, and we will use every existing system that's out there.
Right.
This is not a matter of making a new thing. This is a matter of eliminating things that are not necessary, as opposed to inventing something new.
I'm not advocating that at all. So that wasn't my point. But I know that you're always concerned that I'm saying that.
So the savings come from doing less rather than the reduction in costs come from doing less rather than doing something differently. So
in the business itself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, thank you, Trina. I genuinely mean that, and please do keep the feedback coming. Back to the point that some of the points that were coming with what Kevin was saying before I interrupted with my third point that I remembered. It may well come to pass that the regulators look at this and say, no, we don't care how much you've pointed us towards similar arrangements that exist in other places. We are going to say that you are running a managed investment scheme, say, and this is a regulated arrangement in Australia, which essentially says something to the effect of, if multiple people pool money, or as in they co-contribute money or money's worth in order to get a financial reward, then that is the definition of a managed investment scheme, and you need to register and jump through a whole bunch of hoops, probably
right.
Financial services license as well. If that happens, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to either outsource that, pay for someone to do that for us, and we can probably afford to do that, or we do it ourselves. And actually what it probably looks like is we start with paying someone else to do it, and then in the future, when it becomes obvious that we want to internalize that because we think we can do it better, we do it ourselves.
Yep.
Right. I don't think it could hurt to have a conversation with someone who has that license and or a firm or however that's held, and understand whether they would be a strategic partner initially, even just to do the dialogue part, right? Because then you have an alternative that's in your back pocket. It's not your preferred path, but you've already you have the understanding of what's next, and you don't have to go through the cycles again of getting to that acceptance or approval. Oh, you're going to say no to this, or you're going to say you'll say yes to this variable then, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to get the yes done, because the cycles leading up to that are going to be, there's time, right?
Yeah. And that what you described there is a principle, and I think that's absolutely right. We should be taking that as a principle. In the specific case that I just brought up that case because there is an opportunity to speak to an organisation that does this work, and they're really interested in getting into the game of solar. and running managed investment schemes so they can allow more people to own solar. And so they're probably going to be amenable to having the conversation, and we'll go ahead and do that.
Right. If anything, even if they don't get to play the formal role, it's a wonderful association for the firm. It could create positive exposure. So
that's right. And so there's another area in which Pingala, because we're in the electricity space, and electricity in most Western countries is highly regulated and oftentimes controls monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
We're really constrained in what we're able to do.
Right.
And so some of us think we might be able to sell electricity to households with a collectively owned infrastructure that's sitting inside the household, solar and batteries. But some of us don't think that's true, and so we're forming relationships with electricity retailers so that we can do just that same approach, that same principle of an approach. Form strategic and
right, and there's also marketing approaches too, but we can talk about that offline.
That would be a really interesting conversation for us to have in this group, in an online conversation. Because I think what we're doing is we're as much building a social movement as we are building a legal technical platform to make it easier for people. And I think actually the social movement side of it is easily as important, probably more important, because the way this is going to be a success. There's a great organisation in Spain called Som Energia. They're an electricity retailer in Australian terminology, utility in North American terminology, and they claim that they don't spend any money on marketing, or they spend very little money on marketing. And yet they've grown astronomically, and the story goes that people get recruited by having a conversation with the hairdresser and speaking to the person on the footy field playing football.
Yeah, there's an individual referral model. I mean, obviously with Human, we've considered being the plumbing of businesses like yours, and we've also looked at what would it be like to just create the front-end revolution on an independent customer network. So in anything, we're almost like a parallel universe to yours, having considered how to bring in people, and we've done deep studies on all repeat expense categories too. So, there's answers, I think, that could be mutually held and that we would be prepared to prototype and invest in and keep opaque depending on where we got to, because this is a great first instance that we're quite keen to, that we're organizing to hopefully be involved with deeply with everybody in a way that's just very supportive, right? For us, it's development and or prototyping that we have to do anyway, so on our dime.
Yeah. So that's awesome, Trina. So I think we should really keep these things to an hour. We said they're going to be an hour, and people won't want to look at the recordings later if they're too long.
Right. On governance, though, I just wanted to make a point that I'm not trying to peddle my own wares here, but I really did like the term humocracy. It kind of came out looking at holocracy and your own referrals to what you wanted everyone to look at in the last session. And I thought, why not? Human could actually work on a .org with everybody that actually described the collective movement. And then we start to put some of the language there. I'd be delighted to work on that and just have it associated, but in a neutral way with, what it is that we're putting together. I mean, obviously we're a commercial company, but we're going to be looking at progressively, how do people own these businesses and everything that you've got within how you're pursuing things. So, but I'd like to keep it contained within how we work, because I think it's a great term. And I think it's significantly different than solocracy and whatever the other one was. And I'm like, why not? Why not? Why not put our own term around collective and people owned? Because it's different. It's not an organizational treatise about having a flat, if you would, everyone's a leader type, movement or a organizational structure. It's, it's substantively different. It's more external as a statement, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just putting it out there as a placeholder, as something that I'd be happy to gather thoughts on as they came up in these sessions, and then just sort of organize.
I think it has relevance to a democracy.
Right, obviously, yeah. I mean,
governance
it's very
discussion
reference.
that we had today, but it also has relevance to probably a marketing discussion that we just flagged. We'll have.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All good.
Okay.
So wrap things up. Any final comments? What do people think?
I just want to say hello to Hugh. Will you be there tomorrow, Hugh?
I don't see you.
You're on mute, I think.
Tim?
Yeah, I'm still here as well.
You did well, Tim, not going
I
to sleep.
I can probably unmute you.
No, I know.
I'll just do that for you. Hold on.
You can mute me.
Now you're unmuted, Hugh.
I'm unmuted there. Sorry, I came in late. I got distracted with something and wasn't able to get earlier. What's on tomorrow, Kevin?
9 o'clock at Harry's place.
I can't do 9. I've already got a commitment through to about
Okay. Okay. We'll this is just a WLPC one, so we'll be talking about various things. So, but we will record it as well. So.
Oh, okay, right. So you'll send me a link.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Just realised something that a mistake we made there. Everybody, we need to be much more explicit at the front of these meetings that these meetings are being recorded. We did that, but we also need to be explicit that there's no confidentiality in these discussions. This is open source stuff. Yeah. So, did anybody? Well, two parts to this. Did anybody feel they said anything that is confidential? And if so, let's talk about it now. But I won't publish this until you've all given me the okay. Well, not you, Hugh, because you didn't say anything.
I would love our sidebar first, Tom, and then perhaps I might have a different view on that. But I'm pretty much open with everything anyway.
Yeah, cool.
I'm okay.
Yeah, but we need to be explicit about these if we're going to be able to put them in the public domain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. No,
cool.
I'm okay. Okay, doke.
Okay. Have any other questions? I'll stop recording. But has anybody had any